So, today we're going to explore not only the traditional definition of mother and motherhood, but we're also going to look at the history of how this day came about. And then, of course, here you are at Unity. We're going to go into a little bit of the metaphysical, no, actually a lot of the metaphysical interpretation of that. So we're going to step out of the traditional a little bit, because we are all creators. Like Theresa said, we are always birthing things, even if we're birthing a day, a thought. But before we go any further, what I would like to do first is have all the mothers come up here. All the mothers come up, please. We're just going to do a blessing, a unity blessing. If you consider yourself a mother, please stand up. So, everybody, the unity blessing is: we love you, we bless you, we appreciate you, and we behold the Christ as you. So, ladies, get ready to receive. We love you, we bless you, we appreciate you, and we behold the Christ as you. And so it is. Get back to your seats. Yeah, right, exactly. So we celebrate Mother's Day differently, right? We all celebrate Mother's Day. And, before I did this talk, I thought Mother's Day was really just a Hallmark holiday. And in part of my research, I found out there's actually, in the United States, they spend $25 billion to celebrate this day on chocolates and cards and dinners and whatever else people want, right? However else they decide to celebrate it. Now, Theresa stood up here and sang a beautiful song. I, for one, I'm wearing my mother's jewelry, and one thing I realized today, which was so amazing, when my mother died, she wrote a little note for all of us. I'm one of 7. So her mother's ring has 7 stones on it, and I knew from a very young age that I wasn't going to have children, and for a long time she was just hammering me. She wanted me to have kids and when it's going to happen and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, Mom, it's not going to happen. But anyway, so I was like, isn't it interesting that she gave me the mother's ring? Well, today when I went to put it on, although I don't have any children, I have 7 grandchildren. Isn't that wild? I have a ring now with 7 stones. Now, they're not the same birthstones, but still I was just like, wow, that's really amazing to me. And with all of that, the thing I cherish the most is the little note with her handwriting on the rings that I was supposed to get and the pieces that I was supposed to get. It's like in a plastic bag, in my little jewelry box, and I look at it whenever I take out a piece. So it's just amazing what you women do, what we all do in our nurturing and our birthing. But the past was pretty inspiring. Does anyone know how Mother's Day got started? Lisa. Okay, 1. Good. So it's actually as a result of 3 women. The first one, in 1858, Anne Jarvis was her name. She was a young Appalachian homemaker, and she organized mothers' work days to help educate women on how to properly take care of their children. Then she created these clubs that became a unified force in a region of the country that was still divided by the Civil War, and the form of it changed. In 1868, 10 years later, she organized Mother's Friendship Day, at which mothers gathered with former Union and Confederate soldiers to promote reconciliation. Then in 1872, there was a Boston poet, pacifist, and woman suffragist, Julia Ward Howe. She also wrote the Battle Hymn of the Republic, which is Glory, Glory, Hallelujah, that song. She established a special day for mothers and for peace. And it wasn't long after the bloody Franco-Prussian War that Mother's Peace Day was established. And then in 1905, Anne Jarvis died, and her daughter, Anna Jarvis, decided to memorialize her mother's lifelong activism, and began a campaign that culminated in 1914 when Congress passed a Mother's Day resolution. Now, I think it's interesting that it really all began around peace and creating peace. And Julia Ward, I want to read her proclamation. It's pretty powerful. Arise, all women who have hearts. whether your baptism be that of water or of tears. Say firmly, we will not have great questions decided by irrelevant agencies. Our husbands shall not come to us reeking with carnage for caresses and applause. Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them about charity, mercy, and patience. We women of one country will be too tender of those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure their sons. From the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own. It says, disarm, disarm. The sword is not the balance of justice. Blood does not wipe out dishonor, nor violence indicate possession. As men have often forsaken the plow and the awl at the summons of war, let women now leave all that may be left of home for a great and earnest day of council. Let them meet first as women to bewail, I had to look that word up, it means to express great regret, and commemorate the dead. Let them then solemnly take counsel with each other as to the means whereby the great human family can live in peace, each learning after its own time the sacred impress, not of Caesar, but of God. In the name of womanhood and humanity, I earnestly ask that a general Congress of Women without limit of nationality may be appointed and held at some place deemed most convenient and at the earliest period consistent with its objects, to promote the alliance of the different nationalities, the amicable settlement of international questions, the great and general interest of peace. I want to know where that council is. I want to be a part of that council, you know? Well, it's interesting because, you know, she believed that everything could be settled without bloodshed. And she wondered, why do the mothers of mankind not interfere in these matters to prevent the waste of that human life of which they alone bear and knew the cost? Howe's version of Mother's Day, which served as an occasion for advocating peace, was held successfully in Boston and elsewhere for several years, but eventually lost popularity and disappeared from public notice in the years preceding World War I. For Ann Jarvis, also known as Mother Jarvis, community improvement by mothers was only a beginning. Throughout the Civil War, she organized women's brigades, asking her workers to do all they could without regard for their side their men had chosen. And in 1868, she took the initiative to heal the bitter rifts between her Confederate and Union neighbors. The younger Anna Jarvis, her daughter, was only 12 years old in 1878 when she listened to her mother teach a Sunday school lesson on mothers in the Bible. And she said, I hope and pray that someone, sometime, will found a memorial Mother's Day. Following her mother's death, Anna Jarvis embarked on a remarkable campaign. She poured out a constant stream of letters to men of prominence, President William Taft and former President Theodore Roosevelt among them, and enlisted considerable help from Philadelphia merchant John Wanamaker. By May of 1970, a Mother's Day service had been arranged on the second Sunday in the Methodist Church in Grafton, West Virginia, where Mother Jarvis had taught. The same day, a special service was held at the Wanamaker Auditorium, Philadelphia, which could seat no more than a third of the 15,000 people that showed up. Yeah. The custom spread to churches in 45 states in Puerto Rico, Hawaii, Mexico, and Canada. The governor of West Virginia proclaimed Mother's Day in 1912. Pennsylvania's Virginia in 1913 did the same. The following year saw the congressional resolution, which was promptly signed by President Woodrow Wilson. Mother's Day has endured. It serves now, as it originally did, to recognize the contributions of women. Mother's Day, like the job of mothering, is varied and diverse. So that's the past. Now, you're here at Unity, so we have to look at it from a different perspective, right? From a different perspective. I listened to, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Jackie Woodside, but she did an amazing talk, and I got a lot of this from her. So she talks about different ways of thinking, right? What do you birth into by the choices that you make? Can we cultivate a relationship with our divine that allows us to more consciously choose what we create? Where and when are you birthing peace? So, I don't want anyone to feel excluded. Like I said, I've never birthed a child, but I am a mother. And even Theresa mentioned, it's not necessarily children that we birth. We mother lots of children. We mother lots of things. It could be a book. It could be a business. It could be a new way of thinking. So there's all kinds. But it's about a conscious choice on how we're birthing. So you are nurturing something into being all the time. Every thought is nurturing something into being. And that's what mothers do. They birth and they nurture. Myrtle birthed unity. And a few years later, her husband stepped in and helped her. We wouldn't be here without Myrtle Fillmore. We are birthing into a new reality of consciousness. And it's being called the fifth dimension. And I'm not talking about the soul musical group from the 60s, although they might have had it all going on back then. They might have known. But we have been living in the earth plane, the physical existence, which is three-dimensional consciousness. It's ego consciousness. And I'm going to say 3D and 5D or 5D instead of saying Christ consciousness and ego consciousness, just because it flows out of my mouth a little bit better. But when we move from 3D to 4 and 5 dimensional consciousness, we don't physically move. We don't look any different. It's us experiencing life differently. It's when our consciousness changes that we change and our life changes all around us. How you see life and how do you respond to life. Life can be so delightful all the time. Now, I do notice things going on around me. I notice people's faces and arguments ensuing, and I choose most of the time to not engage. I choose to try and see the light. And Carlos Anderson used to say, actually it was a song of his, if you're seeing the shadow, that means you've turned away from the light. Turn back around and look at the light. See the light in it. The time that we are living in, we are the ascension generations. We are birthing a new world. Repeat that. I am birthing a new world. A little wide, a little louder. I am birthing a new world. All right. Really. Now, 3D living, 3D thinking is very heavily based in rules and traditions. I began this talk with the tradition, honoring mothers. We went into the history, and now we're talking about breaking tradition. We don't have to be bound to tradition. The Christ consciousness is about following an inner guidance that leads us to peace and joy and love and abundance and truth and light and goodness for the world. And the path between the fourth dimensional thinking is when we begin questioning the rules, questioning the traditions, asking, are these really serving me? And that's how you ended up here at Unity Church. Three-dimensional thinking is togetherness where you have to actually physically be together. There are rallies and big parties. But fifth-dimensional thinking, we know that we could never be apart. We know that we are one. We know that we cannot not be connected to all things. That's what Nancy Napier was talking about last week, how we're connected to everything. There's just one of us. There's no need to have a rally or a protest against war. Like Mother Teresa said, I'm not going to go to a protest against war, but ask me to come to a peace rally, I'm right there with you. Same event, just a different perspective. In fifth dimension, we're acknowledging that fear is an egoic need to be protected. In the third dimension, there's a lot of fear that stops us from doing things. In the fifth dimension, we say, oh, there's that fear again. You got to keep on going anyway. Raise your hand if something in your life brings you fear right now. Yeah, look around, everyone. It's a human condition. It's a part of who we are. no worries. Fear has no power when we know that we are one with the divine. Did you ever hear the expression, fear came knocking, faith opened, and there was nothing there? No one was there. Fear came knocking, faith opened the door, and there was nothing there. So in the third dimension, we get attached to things. I have to have that house. I have to have that girlfriend. I have to have that boyfriend. I have to have... In the fifth dimension, it's nice to have all those things, but they don't define us. They're just there. They're just a part of our living. We enjoy possessions, but they don't define us. In third dimension is really, there's a lot of anger that goes on. Now, this might get me in trouble, but I'm going to say it anyway. In the fifth dimension living, there's nothing to forgive. There's just acceptance. There's nothing to forgive because life itself is always unfolding for the good. If you really believe that life is unfolding for the good, how can you say, you did that to me? It just happened. Your feelings about it might not be great, but acceptance is looking at life. Now, from my 12-step program, I asked Doug to, I asked somebody. I knew that in the blue book, the big book, there was this whole thing on acceptance, and I loved it. And years ago, I used to know the page number and everything. But anyway, I got it now, and I'm going to read it. And acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. When I am disturbed, it is because I find some person, place, thing, or situation, some fact of my life, unacceptable to me. And I can find no serenity until I accept that person, place, thing, or situation as being exactly the way it is supposed to be at this moment. Nothing, absolutely nothing happens in God's world by mistake. When I read that, I was just relieved. It was such a relief. Like, okay, now, the next step is doing the acceptance work. Not so simple, but not necessarily easy, right? But anyway, it just kind of puts, and now here I am in unity, and when I'm talking about fifth dimensional thinking and about acceptance, I'm like, well, that guy, Bill W. knew what he's talking about way back then, you know? So it's just, there are no accidents in this world, right? We learn what we're supposed to learn, and it keeps coming back to us to remember. There's nothing to forgive. No one is a victim. In third dimensional living, there's lots of right and wrong, good and bad. You did this, you did that, blah, 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 blah. Fifth dimensional thinking, it just is a lot easier when we remember to go back to that place. How you define yourself is in your knowing that you are one with God, with your divinity. How does that feel? Just to know that. You are one with God. There's nothing to forgive, just to accept. You know, for many years ago, many people would fuss over, oh, that person's gay or gay. There was like a big deal about gayness, blah, 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 blah. Well, now we all kind of accept, I think people mostly accept gay. The big deal now is trans and whatever. It's like, who cares? Just accept people. Just love people. That's what Jesus did, right? Jesus loved everybody. We're here to love everybody. When I am choosing to see something or judge something outside of myself, I've just stepped out of the belief of oneness. I've just stepped out of the belief of my divine power, my divine ideas. And it just keeps me separate. It doesn't serve the good of anybody. So also third dimensional thinking is very reactive to what's going on in the world. Fifth dimensional is accepting what's going on in the world. Third dimensional living is taking things personally. Fifth dimension makes me just make another choice. Just be complete with the stuff that happened. Remembering I couldn't be who I am today if that stuff didn't happen to me in my past. I also go to the other extreme that I don't know that anybody will necessarily believe me at this, but I feel like my soul chose my living situation to have 7 brothers and sisters and the parents that I have. And, I just know that that was all a blessing and all a gift. We are birthing a new world, and the more we make conscious choices to not be a victim of our past, of our present, of any situation, we will birth it together more cleanly, more quickly, and create a new world. Imagine a world where we all live knowing we are one. Imagine, that's the song, right? So what's your commitment right now in life? Is your commitment to love? Is your commitment to raising your kids? Is your commitment to changing the world? Is your commitment to forgiveness? Changing your mind? Acceptance? Albert Einstein, on his deathbed, asked for a pen and a piece of paper with his glasses, and he wrote, "I want to know the mind of God. Everything else is just the details." I want to know the mind of God. Everything else. See, even Albert knew. The scientist. Until this is your biggest commitment, knowing the mind of God, living as the mind of God, devoting every minute to it, every thought to it, every action to it, the world will stay in a 3D world. Struggle and strife and difficulty will be ours. It is up to us because we know better. I always say her name backwards. Maya Angelou said, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better." We all know better. We're all up here. Oh, this was pretty funny. So this week we were with my daughter Dana and her 3-year-old son, and he wasn't listening to her, and she was having a really hard time with it. So she said to him, "I know you hear me. You need to listen to me." And he put his hands on it. I can't believe he just did that. So I know you all come up here to hear what I have to say and hear what everybody else has to say, but are you listening and are you taking it with you when you leave here? Is the conversation you're having in your head with your divine mind, with your Christ consciousness? That's all you want to hear. The only consciousness, the only conversations are those with God. Seeing, loving, embracing, accepting, taking risks, moving forward, changing the world, serving my community. Everything you do and every thought you have is one with God. Seeing God in everything. Sin is any thought that separates you from your divinity, from your divine nature. Anyone ever see yourself as something other than divine? I know I have, a lot. Well, cut it out. You're divine. Okay? Leave here knowing that. So, what are you giving birth to? And how do you give birth to conscious living? 1, it has to be your number 1 commitment. Your most important endeavor is to raise your kids, drive your car, go to work, make money, serve your community, knowing that your consciousness, your God relationship comes first in all of those things. To awaken your divinity, to see God in everything. We cannot create a new world without this being the most important part of your life. Conscious evolution, knowing that spirit beings living spiritually, not necessarily having spirit being having a human experience. We can go to that next level of having a spiritual experience while we're here. And then the third thing is to birth a new world is heap on the praise. Praise God. Praise God. Whenever you see the shadow, turn around, look at the sun. See the joy in everything. The minute we shift our consciousness, the world mirrors that back to us. The minute we choose love over fear, all the angels and saints rejoice. The minute we step into possibility versus being held back by our ego, the stars align and the universe expands. This is what we are called to be. God is responding to the vibrational pattern that you are. So waking up your highest priority is your highest priority. Be the change you want to see in the world. And when we've done that, we will have the peace that Julia Ward Howe and Ann Jarvis hoped for when they created Mother's Day 150 years ago. I say thank you. I'm your sister in prayer, possibility, and power. I love you, I appreciate you, and I see you. Know that you are blessed and a blessing.